Hey everybody, it's your Peacekeeper coming at you with the next video in our How to Play series for the US cruiser line. This is the Tier 8 New Orleans or Nolans class of cruiser. The New Orleans class of cruiser was a class of 7 heavy cruisers launched from 1933 to 1936. The 7 cruisers are New Orleans, Astoria, Minneapolis, Tuscaloosa, San Francisco, Quincy, and Vincennes. The class was originally called the Astoria-class cruisers, but after the sinking of Astoria, Quincy, and Vincennes in 1942 at the Battle of Savo Island, and the subsequent refitting of the surviving 4 ships, they were renamed to the New Orleans-class cruisers. As an interesting side note, Astoria had her keel laid first, but because New Orleans actually got into the water first, she was given the lowest hull number in the class at CA-32. The class itself was considered a testbed for a number of different technologies that the U.S. Navy felt it would need in the coming war it had predicted, which would come shortly after the launching of these ships in the form of World War II. As a result, the New Orleans, Astoria, and Minneapolis formed what was called Design Number 1. Tuscaloosa and San Francisco formed Design Number 2, and Quincy and Vincennes formed Design Number 3. Basically, Design Number 1 was a heavily modified Portland-class heavy cruiser. Design 2 and 3 took that Design Number 1 and tweaked the 4-bridge arrangement, both of them being different arrangements. But overall, all 7 ships basically appeared remarkably the same. And it would take somebody who is an absolute detail-oriented freak to be able to pick all 7 of the ships apart from one another if they were placed in a picture. The New Orleans class of cruiser would be the first U.S. heavy cruiser to fully utilize the 10,000 long ton limitation to heavy cruiser displacement from the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty. Most of that additional weight would come in the form of armor protection. Approximately 15% of the displacement was in protection, whereas the preceding heavy cruisers like the Pensacola were only at 5.6 or in the form of Portland and Northampton at 6%. The class also featured improved fire control computers and radars, which allowed the ship to fire out to a maximum range of 31,700 yards or 29 kilometers. In terms of combat history and overall service history, the 7 New Orleans class cruisers were a tremendous step up from the preceding Portland class cruisers in just about every measurable way except for fuel economy and fuel range. The entire class was one of the most heavily used cruisers in World War II, with 3 of the 7 ships making it into the top 10 most decorated ships of World War II. New Orleans, during the Battle of Tassafaronga, took a torpedo hit just under the number 1 turret, which detonated the 4 magazine and fuel stores. This took the nose of the ship clean off at the number 2 turret. The bow section, as it broke off from the front of the ship, it rotated to the port side and damaged the port side of the ship as well as damaging the port propeller. The skilled crews were able to keep the ship afloat long enough to keep it from sinking, and they were able to do some temporary repairs and then sail it stern first to Australia for temporary repairs, where a temporary bow section was welded to the front of the ship so that the ship could sail all the way back to Puget Sound to have the entire front end of the ship rebuilt. New Orleans is the 5th most decorated U.S. ship during World War II. San Francisco received 17 battle stars during World War II, as well as a Presidential Unit Citation for her actions in the naval battle at Guadalcanal. This makes her the 3rd most decorated ship from World War II after Enterprise and the USS San Diego, an Atlanta-class cruiser. I suppose there's a touch of irony there involving the fact that an Atlanta-class cruiser actually had more, battle stars than the San Francisco, since San Francisco accidentally fired upon the USS Atlanta during the Battle of Guadalcanal. I suppose that's a touch of irony. Thankfully, though, that action didn't sink the Atlanta. It would be other damage that would actually sink Atlanta. Unfortunately, it did result in the death of the Atlanta's captain as well as the admiral of the cruiser division that they were in. USS Minneapolis would be the 6th most decorated U.S. ship in World War II, and the class as a whole participated in so many battles I could go on for probably an hour talking about each class's individual actions throughout World War II. So if you're really interested in figuring out which of these ships did what in World War II, I strongly recommend you either check out Norman Freeman's book on U.S. cruisers or go and check out their Wikipedia pages for the quick synopsis of how they played out in World War II, that is. In terms of their in-game play style, well, before we get into that, I actually want to go over the stats and upgrades because I've got a bit of a rant, for lack of a better phrase, about their in-game play style. So we're going to go into the stats and save the best for last. In terms of hit points, she has 35,400 hit points, up to 5 inches of belt armor, and she does have a TDS value of 4%. She's going to see 4% reduction in torpedo damage. Not really worth putting on there, but hey, it's there. Her main battery consists of 9 total, 3 turrets with 3 guns each, 8-inch 55 caliber Mark 14s. Also, as an interesting side note, only New Orleans received the Mark 14 guns. The other ships in the class either received Mark 15 Mod Zeros or Mark 12 Mod Zeros, and as a result, that makes New Orleans kind of unique. I'm not sure what the differences are between the different 8-inch gun batteries, but they were all 55 caliber in length. They do have a reload time of 12 seconds that was recently buffed from 15 seconds, and we'll talk about that more in the in-game playstyle performance. They have a maximum range of 16.2 kilometers, and she has a 15% fire chance. The secondary armament is 8 5-inch 25 Mark 19 Mod 6s. They also serve as part of her anti-aircraft battery. They are dual-purpose guns. They have a range of 4.7 kilometers and a fire chance of 9.5%. That's pretty good. In terms of anti-aircraft defense, she has 9 single 20mm Oerlikons. She has 17 dual 20mm Oerlikons, 6 quad 40mm Bofors mounts, and of course those 8 5-inch 25 caliber Mark 19 Mod 6 dual-purpose guns. Her maximum speed is 32.5 knots, although I have the speed flag on here, which is bumping it up to 34.1. She has a 660 meter turning radius and a 5.5 second rudder shift time using only the first rudder shift module. And being a tier 8, she does have access to that last module slot, which could reduce that further if you really wanted to reduce it even further. In terms of concealment, 9.5 kilometers, that's going to be with Concealment Expert on the Captain as well as a concealment module. Just over 10 kilometers, about 10.5 kilometers without the concealment module if you were to choose the rudder shift module instead. Her detection range by air is 5.9 kilometers with a full concealment build. Speaking of modules, we'll dive on over to those modules. I am currently running Main Armaments Mod 1 in the first slot. That's going to reduce the risk of the main battery becoming incapacitated by 20%, increase their hit points by 50%, and decrease the time it takes to repair the main battery by 20%. There's no torpedoes, so we don't have to worry about the rest of that upgrade. In the second slot, I'm using Aiming Systems Mod 1, which is going to reduce the dispersion of the main battery by 7%. Of course, it also increases the secondary firing range by 5%, as well as decreasing the dispersion by 5%. Really don't care about that part of the upgrade. However, if you guys are going to be running this ship in competitive play, I highly recommend you take the AA Guns Mod 2 upgrade up here, which is going to boost out your anti-aircraft range 20% more. Speaking of that anti-aircraft range, 4.2 kilometers is where it kicks in without that upgrade module. So with that upgrade module, pushes it out to basically 5 kilometers, which really isn't that far. You can push it out a little bit further with advanced firing training on the Captain. The only other upgrade on here that really makes any sense is Main Battery Mod 2, although, again, as I've said in other videos, I think the decrease in reload time actually hurts more than it helps, and the 180-degree turn time of the main battery really isn't too shabby, so it's really not worth taking this upgrade in my opinion. You can see here I have the super upgrade, I guess we'll call it, for defensive fire. I personally would rather have the decrease in dispersion as opposed to the increase in time of defensive fire, but if you were going to run it in competitive play as an anti-aircraft boat, that might not be a bad upgrade to take. Although I think taking the range is a better idea personally. In the third slot, we have Propulsion Systems Mod 1. The only other option I'd really consider viable is Steering Gears Mod 1. However, I think getting away from the action is probably more important than steering in that action. a good case could be made for either or. So either or of those would be a good idea. That's basically going to reduce the risk of your engine or rudder being incapacitated, as well as decrease the time it takes to repair them. In the fourth slot, I am using Steering Gears Mod 2, which reduces the rudder shift time by 20%. That drops it down to that 5.5 seconds. As a interesting side note, you could take Propulsion Systems Mod 2 which reduces the time it takes to get to full power, in that -6 to 6 knot range. If you're one of those people who likes to sit near islands and camp near islands and move back and forth, that might be a viable option for you, but I would highly recommend taking Steering Gears Mod 3 in the last slot instead of Concealment Systems Mod 1, because the rudder shift time without it is just a little too long for my taste. Maybe it works for you. Personally, I'd rather have a slightly more agile ship. In the last slot, there's only 2 of these options that I really consider to be super viable. However, I could see a case being made for the other option. I personally am running Concealment Systems Mod 1, which reduces the detection by 10%. Steering Gears Mod 3 would be my next recommendation, which is going to reduce the rudder shift by 40% and reduce the time it takes to repair it by 80%, which is a huge reduction in repair time for your rudder. The kind of dark horse in this is the Target Acquisition Systems Mod 1, which is going to increase what they call the assured acquisition of enemy ships by 50%, which, if you get within a certain distance of a ship, regardless of whether or not you can actually physically see the ship, it detects them. This comes up when you're approaching a destroyer sitting in smoke. It's that range that when you're approaching that ship, when you can see it. Personally, you have radar, so use that instead of getting close. The ship doesn't have the maneuverability to really duke it out with a destroyer at close range. In fact, if I were that destroyer, I would probably punish you heavily by putting AP into your broadside if I didn't get you with the torpedoes, and it'd be very hard for you to kill me as a result. But anyway, that's what that does. It does increase your overall spotting range by 20%, which is nearly useless because you can't shoot out that far. And it does increase the range at which you acquire torpedoes by an additional 20%. Okay, so now it's time to talk about how this ship plays in game and go into a little bit of a mini rant before we get into the battle video. New Orleans, prior to the US cruiser buff in this last patch, had a 15-second reload speed. And the reload time was never the problem with this ship. The guns hit extremely hard with AP, and this thing always massacred cruisers. I'm not going to complain about extra DPS, but much like Des Moines, the problem wasn't the fact that the ship didn't do enough damage when played properly. It's that the fact that the ship is so massive in its broadside, and it is so poorly armored, that the ship just takes damage from all angles. I personally would much rather have seen something more interesting come of it, whether that's thicker armor in the hull plating, or a repair party consumable, or something else. There were other ways that they could have buffed New Orleans, but since they buffed the rate of fire, I have to admit, I do feel like the ship is overall a decent ship. It's not a ship that I feel like, oh man, you just absolutely have to go back and play. That I will reserve for the Baltimore here at Tier 9, but I just don't feel like the ship was lacking that much in the gunnery department. It was always the survivability issue that frustrated me. And so the DPS upgrade was kind of like, eh? Anyway, the ship is relatively maneuverable, and for a cruiser, it is relatively stealthy. But its biggest benefit, its biggest strength, is the 8-inch AP from the US ships. All of the 8-inch gun ships for the US Navy have favorable auto bounce angles, and that makes this ship an absolute murderer of cruisers. We are going to see that in this battle video that we're going to get to in just a minute, but oh my goodness, does this ship just absolutely destroy cruisers. And on that note, I'm just going to toss in this aside here. Check the link down in the description for the black blast bags. That would be these gun bloomers here on the guns. There were a couple of you requesting them. That link will be down in the description. Anyway, onto that battle video. Alright, so this is a Tier 8 fight. It is on Trap, which is one of the more frustrating maps to play. New Orleans is an awful lot like Pensacola in the fact that if you get a map that has a lot of islands in it, that you can hide behind and use to kind of ambush ships. It makes the ship easier to play. It's far less of a headache. It's far less of a hassle to player. And this map is not one of those maps. Even playing up near sea, there's just not a whole lot there going on, so it's really quite frustrating to play on open maps like this. Also, I know I didn't go over the consumable slots for this ship, but this is the first U.S. cruiser that gets radar as an option. You lose your fighter plane or your scout plane for it. That is a much needed change. Don't take your scout plane. Trust me, the radar is worth 10 times what that scout plane is when it comes to detecting enemy ships. And it does have a pretty usable range. It's right around 8.5 kilometers or so. Also, I've got HE loaded. Really not the strongest thing on this ship. In fact, the AP is really where these ships shine. I just think that a lot of people have, especially coming from the Cleveland to the Pensacola, there's a really rough transition there where the U.S. line goes from having still really good AP and actually quite underrated AP at Tier 5 with the Omaha and Tier 4 with the Phoenix and Tier 6 with the Cleveland, which is just an absolute flamethrower. When you spam HE with the 8-inch guns on a U.S. cruiser, you don't gain much of anything. The fire chance is there, but it doesn't seem to start that much fires, but more importantly, the HE doesn't seem to penetrate anything. And so you don't do a whole lot of damage to anything like, say, battleships. You're certainly not going to be a Zhao, which just, will lop off 6,000 damage from a battleship superstructure just in the blink of an eye. New Orleans simply won't do that. So we are here at B because the original decision on this was to go a B. I find that kind of sitting around this island waiting for things to develop helps me out to know where to put myself. Now, the ship has a 9.5 kilometer detection range. We certainly want to use that to the best of our abilities if we can. With this island here, I'm not afraid to push out and target some further away ships. But ultimately, we want to see what pops up in B and see if we can't support any cruisers that are in that area. Now, it seems like most of their team is going basically the same way, A and B. They've sent something to C. I don't know what it is, but that's okay. But for the most part, their entire battle line is going to A. And it's an interesting tactic for that side of the map. This map tends to favor the engagement at A, and as a result, it's kind of annoying to play, a ship, especially like New Orleans, where you don't have a whole lot of utility aside from, well, you got radar, that's a lot of utility. It can be, just not as much as you'd think. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive into B here. We're not detected again. We got 9.5 kilometer detection range. We've got HE loaded in case a enemy destroyer decides to pop up. And we've got ships off in the distance that we could engage if we wanted to. We're going to kind of fish around and look for some targets that are more appealing. Now you'll notice I switched to AP there because there is a broadside cruiser off in the distance. And I don't usually recommend doing this, but there's so much of their fleet that's over there, we're just going to go ahead and engage anyway. And being as we are in B, I definitely don't recommend beginning your engagement until you are up against this island to prevent anything on the other side from being able to shoot at you. And so we are engaging this Cleveland at a distance. That first salvo was a way overshot. I thought he was going much, much, much faster than he actually was. He ended up not being, so we had to change. And then the second salvo, he sped up, and I suddenly lost the ability to do damage to him. So, okay, fine. How about a Buddione that is basically sitting stationary going backwards? We'll shoot over an island. U.S. cruisers have this nasty tendency to basically be island humpers, where they sit over islands. Now look at these shots. Yep, okay, so there's 6K taken off. Keep backing up for me. Yep, we are still shooting over this central island, which is just impressive. The slow shell velocity really, really helps out in that regard. Ooh, taking damage from And Atlanta, well, not before taking another 7,000 damage off of their Buddioni over there. Their Atlanta, though, yeah, present that broadside to me, buddy. We're kind of fishing back around because the Atlanta was going to go behind the island here. And I figured, well, we can probably shoot at him. But I decided, why not? Let's see if this Atlanta's in a position for me to actually shoot at. Bummer, he's not. Okay, how about the Scharnhorst? Well, we're not detected, so while we are currently radaring everything else, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get out of the situation into a more favorable position. I definitely don't want to be in a location where I can get flanked by a cruiser or a battleship. I want to put myself into a position where I can maximize broadside damage. And so we shot at the Scharnhorst. We didn't do a whole lot of damage to him, but it's damage nonetheless. Now the Alba there is pushing on up into B, and really our whole team is pushing on up. I'm putting this island between myself and the Scharnhorst. I know I can get him on the other side of this island, and he can't get me. One of the advantages of the big heavy gun shells, the shells, as well as the slow muzzle velocities, that really helps out in that regard. But we got a Farragut over here that is just harassing the piss out of me, so we're going to go ahead, we're going to try and put him out of his misery. Maybe we'll cap C in the process. He's up here by himself. Now, if it were me in this Farragut, the first thing I would do is do a about face, stop firing, and get the heck out of Dodge. But he seems interested in the fight, so we'll take the fight to him. Now, he is maneuvering, so we need to plan accordingly. And we are not doing a good job of hitting him. But we are up to 21,666 damage. Now, because he's a destroyer, I'm anticipating him having launched torpedoes. I've lost sight of him. There is a battleship coming from behind at B, so we need to be cautious of him. But more importantly, I know that there's torpedoes coming somewhere from this Farragut, and I was hoping that by going straight there behind the island for a while, we'd be able to throw that off. And he pops back up again, and, well, hey, buddy, how's it going? And Atlanta decides to join the fight on the other side. You can see 1,800 damage with 2 shell hits. We just didn't do a whole lot in terms of shell hit damage. Now we're in a real predicament because US 5-inch shells, even in AP form at these distances, it can't Citadel, but it's going to do enough pen damage that he could potentially do enough damage to really hurt. And you can see he's adding up quite a lot of damage. And so now we are dividing and conquering. So there was 5 shell hits there. We're dividing and conquering. We've got this Atlanta behind us. We got no one else that can engage this Atlanta, so it's basically me versus this Atlanta. And, well, Atlanta... Ooh, started me on fire. What a jerk. Atlanta is going slow enough that I can go ahead and take advantage of the fact that he is sitting basically stationary. We're going to lop some shells into him, 3 shells, but more importantly, guess who showed up again? Mr. Farragut. AP loaded, not exactly the most utilitarian armor to stop those shells, and as you can see, 4 over pens does not help my situation any. And so we switch back to HE real quick, and we're going to finish him off before he does any more damage. And there he goes. Okay, so we got a cruiser down. A destroyer down. Now it's on to this Atlanta again. He's being a bit pesky. He's behind an island. But more importantly, I'm no longer detected. He pops out. We get a good bead on where he's going to be at. He opens up to us. Shot out. American piercing. Here it comes. Yeah. 10,000 damage. 2 Citadel hits. Took literally half of that poor Atlanta's hit points off. We're up here by ourselves. Our whole team is down at A. Things are looking kind of dire. But ultimately, I can go cap C, which is what I'm going to do, and it's going to happen unopposed. And so while we're doing this, take a minute to, stare at the beauty of the New Orleans class. I'm just kidding. Interesting side note, if you go and read the Wikipedia article on the New Orleans class, apparently for its era, the designers felt that the class was, not a bad-looking ship. Looking at it in hindsight, it's kind of like, ooh, yeah, you're not too pretty. Unlike other ships from this era or before, hint, hint, New Mexico, this ship's not that pretty to me, so, yeah, random aside. In terms of other gameplay, tactics here, we're capping because it's an unopposed cap. We need the extra cap points, even though we're ahead in ships. I get the distinct impression, even though I can't see any other ships aside from this Hatsuharu, that we are going to end up losing more ships down at A. So all the points that we can get, especially since we're now behind, all the points that we can get are only going to help us at the end of this match. We are going to dive on into B here, though, to address some of the ships that are currently in B. But before we do that, obviously, we need to finish capping C. And really, this is a bit of a gamble because the inside of B has no cover in it, and they still have a lot of, well, they have 2 battleships to our 3, but all of their battleships are within range of me, as well as several cruisers, including that, I think it's actually a Takao, but it shows up as an Otago on my screen because of the, I don't have the option enabled in my port. So C is finally captured. Let's dive on into B. Now we are going to go ahead and use our stealth to get as close as possible to this Otago before we engage him. And the reasons for this are quite simple. 1, I don't have all my guns traversed to that side. 2, if he comes into here at close range, we're going to do nothing but destroy him. And you'll see just how quickly he disappears under concentrated fire. And it's quite impressive, and that favorable auto bounce angle really comes into play when engaging him. So we're getting closer here, 12 kilometers. We've still got a couple kilometers to go, but he's opening up a broadside to me. I've got all my guns to bear on that side. We're going to go ahead and take the shot. So shot is out on the Otago. Shots are coming in to land. Well, 2,500 damage basically, so not a whole lot of damage. He disappears real quick. He's just out of radar range, so we don't have radar to play with. We're going to angle in towards him, and we've got a Cleveland there as well, so we got to be extra careful of what's going on here. So I'm detected again. He decides he's going to fire, but he's still broadside or nearly broadside to me. He does some damage to me. I return back, and 460 damage. Oh, no. Yeah, go ahead and open up, buddy. My guns come up faster than yours do. And at this point, we want to keep ourselves angled towards him. He's going to shoot HE at me, but we're going to continue to shoot AP. 4,000 damage. And again, he is angled just correct to the point where these shells are going to pen. Yup, 3 citadels for 18,000 damage in 1 salvo. And then I think he just gives up and opens up his broadside to accept the love that he's about to receive. Boom, he's done. Cleveland. So the Cleveland is 6-inch gun cruiser. This ship was actually really well protected against 6-inch guns. Oh, Otago torps. Oh no. And he is presenting that right profile. And 4 more citadels for 21,000 damage. Oh, and he doesn't even have his guns pointed at me to accept the love. And he's gone. So now we need to make a decision because that's a Scharnhorst really close. Let's get the heck out of Dodge before he realizes what just happened. And yes, I am spamming requests for help because the Scharnhorst is a nasty ship to try and get into a fight with. Taking fire from the other Scharnhorst at range, this Scharnhorst isn't really paying attention to me, and I probably could have just continued to sail away, and he probably would have red misted into something else. A, we are capping A. They are contesting B, so we still have 2 caps to their none, which is good. That Scharnhorst disappears behind the island. I am no longer detected. We are bailing as fast as we can out of this whole battle. And my goal is to keep this island between us as long as possible, to keep myself alive for as long as possible, but I'm also trying to get out and away from him far enough away that I can be invisible without him detecting me. Well, now he's starting to go around the far side of the island, so we're going to traverse our guns back the other way, and we're going to have to duck around the horn of this island over here instead. I just can't, we're too far away from this island to play Ring Around the Posy, so we're just going to have to bail entirely. And unfortunately, he is within range, and it's really quite annoying. He is chasing like heck. Our battleships that are up on the CD line, I don't know what they're doing, but man, does it make this really make me nervous. We're going to pop radar to see where he's at, see if we can't get a pot shot off on him before he finally goes into that smoke over there. Again, we're turning away, so there's 2,300 damage. We got the reset. He is now focused on me. Tremendous attention span. Oh my goodness, I'm sitting here thinking this is the end, and... Wow, 760 damage, dude. Congrats, you overpenned. And time to turn completely and get around this island and disengage as fully as possible. We got one more quick salvo from him before we can disappear behind the island. And, well... Oh! It bounced off the turret. And I started him on fire for his troubles. So, we are now behind an island. We are in relative safety. Fire off one last salvo to see if maybe we can't start him on fire. Yeah, 924 damage. That's what I'm talking about with the HE. It just doesn't seem to do much in the way of damage. We are at 3,613 hit points. A stiff breeze at this point would take us out of this fight. But because I'm cheeky and because I want to win this battle and not lose it because our two battleships are off in La La Land and who knows what our other guys are doing, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to turn back around and see if we can't get the Scharnhorst. A bit of a shout out there to Quafer. If you've never seen his YouTube channel, definitely check it out. He is also in the Super Test program, which is why he's in the Alabama. He is currently testing that at this time. No idea why he's hiding behind the island, though. And there's Tirpitz in the back. What? Anyway, so we're going to use the island cover for as long as possible to keep this Scharnhorst away. He's sailing away, so we should be able, by the time we get around this island, I should be out of his visual range, so that can allow me to sneak to an island to get some good shots in on him. And you can see there he is turning away. And so from here, my goal is twofold. I have two options. I can either attempt to get the Scharnhorst to go around the horn on the south side and come around the east side of this island, or we can get him to do a ring around the posy and burn him to death in the middle. You know, the Tirpitz still sails around the other side of the island. I really didn't want him to do that. I wanted him to sail into the cap. You're a tier 8 battleship going against a tier 7. You've got an extra torpedo tube compared to him. Why can't you go and brawl it out with him? I get that you're trying to get back to Quafer and his Alabama, but seriously, stop running from the fight that you're in. Go fight him. Well, since the Scharnhorst is 11.6 kilometers out and he is bailing, it looks like he is trying to see if I went around the island the long way. Haha, joke's on you. I doubled back so I could get behind some islands and burn you to death. We are going to find this island here to be quite a cozy partner. And maybe we'll get a parting shot off here as we go into cover of this island if he pops back up. Oh, yep. And oh. So we shot at him one more time just to kind of see if we could aggravate him. Unfortunately, it looks like those shells missed, but we're going to hide behind this island and pray that those guys come back and assist. I don't want to poke too far out. I don't care about that rear gun being out, because if I cared about it, we would get too much damage. But if I stay behind, there's this nice little nook and cranny here that I can shoot. We want to make sure that we are going slow enough that we aren't going to roll out into his visual plane. And nope, our detection went back down before it came back up. So, haha, reset your cap again. And this is being really cheeky and quite annoying. I don't care because, honestly, at this point I had so little hit points it was necessary for me to do this. So, we started him on fire, but again, 924 damage. I mean, what? So, if you're going to do the island popping thing, I highly recommend you pay attention to just how far you are. Hey, Confederate! How far you are going out and around an island. It is important to pay attention to how fast you are going to make sure that you don't sail out when you shoot and to make sure that you have time to get back before they detect. Again, with the reset, only 924 damage. He's at a point where he's sailing. It's going to take him a while because of the angle to actually detect me. And so I am safe so long as somebody continues to spot him. And so, again, 2 more defends. That time we got 2,700 damage. And the game is coming to an end in 30 seconds. maybe we can pop out and get some more damage. We got 30 seconds to harass this poor Scharnhorst. Why not? Ah, island's in the way. Well, that's annoying. So we're only going to get one more salvo off, maybe two at most, but one. That's all it's going to be. And so, shots out. 3 shells. Yay, 924 more damage. And so that's going to be the end of the game. You can see just how quickly the armor piercing adds up on this. You really have to take those broadside ships and just punish them. It works for battleships. You know, you treat them like German battleships if you were in another battleship and shoot at the upper belt. 118,355 damage, 8,812 experience, 2,937 base XP. There's the credit screen and the detailed report and credit screen. Anyway, in terms of New Orleans, she's come a long way from where she was, but I just still feel like the ship is still lacking in a lot of ways. It's more fun to play than the previous version was because the rate of fire buff helps kind of keep you in the fun mode, but ultimately I just don't find it to be that great of a ship. It's okay. It's not a horrible grind. Anyway, I'm your Peacekeeper. Like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for watching.